Okay, we're gonna start with F-Spy right here. This again is a free open source piece of software that I highly recommend. We're just gonna open the left image. I'm gonna start by undimming this, and I'm gonna arrange these in a way that'll give me a solve. So usually I find with buildings, it's helpful to make one of these Z. There's not really a good X-axis vanishing point, that's why. So I would say typically it's best to, if you're, solving this for the apartment, you wanna make your vanishing points on the apartment itself versus putting them somewhere else. It's less important to solve the entire scene than it is to just get the apartment in the right perspective. Let's see there, and how about, let's do that. And then for the other one, let's do the Y. I'm gonna do these siding bits up here. It's also helpful to know that with buildings like this, there's not really such thing as a perfect cube. These aren't always level, but generally, as long as you're not on the top, sometimes those are slanted to let the rain roll off. If it's not the top, usually it's pretty close. So second to top is fairly good. And then I'm going to do this one down here. And then I'm going to start by checking YZ like this. It'll pop up this grid, and let's see. I'm just checking to see if these line up. That looks okay. Let me check the axis, the Z axis. Those look all right. Let's move on to this one, XZ. Okay, so you see how this is lined up here, but on this side it's a little off. It's a little off here versus it's closer on that side. For that reason, I'm gonna change this from image midpoint to third vanishing point. And I'm gonna now do, again, I said the x-axis doesn't have really much of a vanishing point, but I'm still going to estimate it just to make this a little more accurate. So I'll use that. That looks pretty level to me. Even though there's a little bit of something bending over here, which is probably the building itself and not the camera angle. And then I'm gonna do this right here. Just gives our grid a little more accuracy. Okay, so that's our F-Spy solve. As easy as that. And I'm gonna save this. Let's make a new folder for F-Spy. I'm just gonna call this apartment left camera. So now I want you to open this file, walking building part 1, okay? And the first thing you need to do is import F-Spy. If you don't have this option, again, see the previous video. And go to Assets, F-Spy, and this is the file we just saved. So double click that. This is our ground plane, right? And currently you can see that the camera thinks it's underground, which is not what happened in real life. So let's add a cube. And I know based on measuring my building on Google Maps, you can sort of go to top-down view and take a measurement, or I don't know, if you have the ability to measure it in real life even. I know mine is 25 feet wide. So I'm gonna make all of these dimensions 25 feet. Make sure you type in feet if you're in metric. And I also want it to be flush with the ground level. So this happens to be the amount you want to raise it by since it's a cube. You just need to put that in the Z. And let's also apply that scale. So Now our building is approximately where it should be, but the camera is still not right. So let's go into wireframe and select the camera and start positioning it so it's a little more accurate. Okay, so that looks about level, and now I'm going to start changing the dimensions of the cube in edit mode to fit what the building actually looks like. So I'm going to bring this all the way up here. Now let's make an edge loop here and just bring it to the end so that just that much. Now I want to take this and this. So we're selecting just the sides and the back and hit Y. The reason I do this is so I can start making edge loops and adding detail to the front without doing that to the entire building. Okay, so let's do exactly that. Let's add some edge loops here, here, how about one here? We're just filling in all the places that we can see where we need to put detail. Let's put one here and select just the front part and drag it out. You can see I want this to approximately match the angles of this detail. And we'll do the same to this. We'll put one here, a little underneath, and then we'll drag it out to like right there. Okay, and that's what we have so far. I want now to add our material to the building. So go to the material tab here and add a new material. Let's call this apartment left. Hit this dot on base color and go to image. Open a new image and let's go into our photos folder. And this is the same folder that we used for the F-Spy. Navigate now to the modifiers, add modifier, and type subdivision surface. Change it to simple. I like to put this on 4. And now we're going to add a second modifier, UV project. And on this one, you want to select UV map, the camera, which is apartment left camera, and then change this aspect ratio to your photo, which in our case is 3:4. Now, if this worked, you should be able to hide this and see virtually no difference in terms of geometry and projection. The shading will be a little different, like this. Okay. And this is what the subdivision surface does, by the way. It corrects some of the warping errors. Okay, and let's call this cube, let's rename this cube to apartment main. Let's go back into our material for a second and go into the specular and turn this IOR level completely to 0. Let's add a few more edge loops now. Let's do this door. And we'll do the top part. And we can do the bottom as well. And we can even extrude this in. And let's fix this top too. We're going to select this edge, control clicking it. We'll bring that up. And we'll follow that with this one too. And let's also start this window. So we'll do a loop here and one here one on the top, and one on the bottom. I'm just doing them where I know I'm going to inset, so we'll do that part. Seems about right. And now we'll make another set of loops. Do one right here and here. We'll inset this part more. Maybe a little less. Let's just add a little more detail on this one. Subdivide. So now what I want to do is separate this part. So let's hit Y. Let's select this edge loop and hit Y. And then select this edge loop with L and this that we just separated and merge that. So now these are two different pieces. By doing this, we can start to delete some of these unnecessary loops. Just a little bit cleaner. Delete that too. Let's do this piece now. We're going to add a cube. And let's go ahead and snap it to so it's flush with the front of the facade. We're going to make this white part here. Let's bring it down so it's flush with this and just start shaping it to what I see. Now I can tell even just by the photo that this is not a completely even piece of geometry, so I am allowing myself to just shape it as I see fit and warp it into place. I think that's okay. It just gives the building more character. We're going to make the center bay column now. And here's how we're going to do it. We are going to add a new object. So make sure that we are now in object mode, not edit mode. And we're going to do a cube. Okay, let's pull this out. Here's what we need to do. Subdivide. Select this edge loop and this part and delete it. So we just have this half of a cube. And we're going to add a mirror modifier. Now let's make this flush with our building. Let's call this apartment bay column. And we'll make that flush. If you're having trouble with the snapping, it's probably because we have so many subdivisions. You see, in reality, this is what our mesh looks like. So there can be a lot of detail that it's trying to snap to. I think at this point we can start reducing this a little bit. Let's put it on 2. That'll help. So I want to start by lining this up with this edge right here. So the way this mirror works is it takes this origin and it mirrors everything across that axis. So I need that to be further to the right, clearly. So by using this affect only origins, I can determine where that axis is. And let's start by going into wireframe here and just moving it a bit to the right. We'll just do this for now. We can hide our other mesh, by the way. I want to bring this back so we're respecting this bit right here. Let's bring this edge forward. So we have something like this. Let's also go ahead and delete this edge. I'm going to delete these as well, actually. So I can see that this is not really where it needs to be. So let's bring it forward and maybe back a little bit. It's all about just eyeballing it until it's right. That looks good to me. You can also add edge loops to see how it's coming along. And I'm just going to delete that edge loop now that I've checked it. Let's add a new face. And let's increase this merge distance a little bit. Okay, so this part is now looking pretty good, but again, I can see that this is not really even close to where the mirror needs to be. So let's go back into object mode. This is still set to origin, so let's continue moving this to the right. We'll move this to compensate. So that's what we have right now. Let's start raising this up. This is going to be hard to get 100% accurate, but as long as we're just using this as a guideline and less of a blueprint, we should be okay. So let's extrude this up. Hit Alt-E to extrude this along normals. Just a little bit goes a long way, as you can see. Delete this and this. And again, extruding up. Let's bring this edge forward so we can match this slope. All right, and I'm also just going to continue this down a little bit by selecting this part and dragging it to the bottom. Now what we're going to do is we're going to shift click from the bay window to the building and hit copy modifiers and copy materials. And we're going to add back our mirror modifier. We'll raise the merge distance again. What I want to do now is just add some edge loops for these windows. And now once we've done that, we can apply our mirror. Just make sure it's first in the stack. So now we'll have edge loops on this side. This is a disaster over here, but that's okay. We'll fix that later. Let's go ahead and remove our subdivisions from both of our objects. We'll add one more edge loop here actually, and then we'll remove that. And we'll apply it. So now if we open a UV editor, you can see that our UVs have been essentially baked into the mesh. Let's start by correcting this bay window. Under the materials, we still have this apartment left. I want to duplicate that and create another apartment left from the list. Except we're going to hit this button to create a new material from that and call this one right. And you guessed it, we're going to open the right image. So now we can use that image to fill in the missing textures from here. Let's take all the faces where we need that texture and select them and hit assign. That should automatically bring up the right image, but if it doesn't, hit this pin right here, so it's off. You can also just navigate to it under here. I'm going to start by selecting this and hitting project from view in a way that our viewport is vaguely matching the image, like that. And approximately line it up. This should and does not need to be perfect, because we're going to actually do this by hand. Just try to eyeball it. So basically, I'm just referencing what I see on the geometry and the image, and I'm also just using the front of the image to sort of line it up so it hides the seam as best as possible. I'm also going to start going back to the UVs on the other image and fixing them so they line up more accurately with these seams, like this one. Let's go ahead and hide the bay window and create an edge loop right in the middle of it. We're just going to use these newly created faces on the right to fix the seams. We're going to add that material right and assign it to these faces. Now when we add back our bay window, we can start to project these. Okay, let's fix this bit now. We're just going to slide this over to the right to fix this part. Let's add an edge loop here. Now let's get rid of this car. So I'm going to take this part and I'm just going to find a new place for these faces to go. I'm going to add a third image now. Based on the right one, we'll do our same process here. We're going to make this one center. Assign that. We're going to put these really anywhere in the image, but I think this is a good place. And we'll do the same to these parts. Okay, let's do this part. Let's start by adding an edge loop here to make things easier. And here. And that should be good for that. So we can see that this center image has a way better view of the door. So we're going to go ahead and add that material to this object as well and assign those faces to the door and just reproject this in the UVs. And that should just about do it for the front. Let's add an air conditioner real quick. We'll take a new cube and make it its own object. This doesn't need to be perfect by any means. And then we're just going to take the whole thing and reproject it onto this one. Let's do a project from view on it. So highlight the whole thing with A, U, project from view. Make sure this is assigned to the correct material. Let's reproject this face back onto the center so that this AC is a little less warped. Click Assign. Same thing here with the air conditioner. A new cube. Scale it down. Let's just cover this entire AC with it. We can even put the different parts of the AC on different parts of on different materials. This one was the center. Let's make these ones on the left. The reason that I like using project from view is sometimes it's a little hard to tell which face belongs to which part of the geometry, and it's an easy way to lay them out in an identifiable way. Okay, great. There's one piece of geometry that is missing from the top of the building, so let's make it right now. Let's go into edit mode, into the main apartment object, and we'll add a cube. Let's snap it to the top here so it's completely flush with this corner. We will then do our classic eyeballing and just match what we're seeing in the image. Now this is not really lining up on the seam for me. You see how in the image it should be here, but in my geometry it looks like it would be closer to the right. You should always favor the geometry that you have. Okay, and then let's take this whole part of the object, and again select it with L and hit U, project from view. Let's just make sure it's assigned to left, and then like we've been doing, we will arrange the UVs. Let's take this part, these three faces, let's make these assigned to the right image, just so we have a bit of a cleaner UV situation. We'll just reposition these in the same way. Now let's just take the top here, finally. We can just tuck this all into this part of the image. Great, okay. Now let's do the rooftop. Still on this object, let's make a new material slot. We'll call this rooftop. Add an image to the base color. This one here, rooftop. This is an image that I took from a moving subway train. Project that from view to straighten out the UVs. Something that we need to do is resize this because the actual building is closer to 50 feet and we're currently at, this is currently only 8.27 meters. So I don't know here. Let's go back to mid-imperial. We're only at 27 feet right now, so let's bring this all the way to, let's bring it to 50. So we'll just, from top-down view, we can just do this. And we want it to be approximately there. Those are the dimensions we're looking for. So now let's go back to our rooftop. Let's give that a project from view, and then let's bring that UV so it's right about here. Let's quickly do the sides now. Selecting all these sides, we'll add another material. Let's call this siding. Go into the material properties. And let's, on the principled BSDF, hit Control-Shift-T and use this wood siding material. Get the normal, the roughness, the color, and the ambient occlusion selected. And hit OK. And it should automatically set you up this material. Let's assign that so we can see what it's starting to look like. And right away, I always like to use the ambient occlusion. It'll especially help with this one. The way I do this is I do Control-Shift and I drag, which gives us this mix node. You want the way ambient occlusion works with the material in Blender is you want it to multiply the base color. So base color first, then ambient occlusion in the second slot, and change this to multiply. So it'll change, this is what the regular base color looks like, and this is with the ambient occlusion. You can tell it's a little more intense. And I think it gives the siding a more realistic look. I also think this looks a little too much like wood. I want it to have more of a painted look. So let's take another mix color node, put that right on top of the base color. We can also flip these around so they make a little more sense. And I'm just going to select one of these colors here. How about that? I think that gives it more of a painted look. Okay, let's project this properly. Let's just do U unwrap. Let's open back up another UV panel. And let's rotate this. Let's scale it by 10. So the first thing we actually need to do is we need an edge loop to be lined up with this brick over here. Let's do that in the front as well and on the bay window. Because I forgot that this is not supposed to be paneling. Let's add a temporary brick. And just make it red so we don't forget. We'll do that with this as well. As well as this. So let's double the scale of this. Just go here, do S2. Yeah, that should be about right. Let's fix these front bits of the siding. Let's just extend this out. A little bit, so you can get this shadow here. Let's add our brick material. We're going to do the same thing that we did with the other one. Brick 77. And again, let's do the normal. Again, make sure you do the GL. Blender uses GL, not DX. Roughness, color, ambient occlusion. Let's flip these around. Switch this to multiply. Let's also make this 5 to just dirty up these bricks a little more. Select all the bricks. Let's do cube projection for this one. And we should also inset these a little bit. Okay, let's actually bring this brick up a little bit. I think it's a little too low. So let's make sure the correct face attributes is on, and let's, with this edge loop selected, bring this up to about here. And let's do the same with the rest of the building. That's a little better. So I want some windows around the sides of this. And I think the best candidate for a window is this front one right here. So let's just take a second to improve this a little bit. Let's start by making a couple more edge loops for the window. And we'll select this whole panel and change it to the center. Let's realign this UV. The reason I want to add more detail to this window is because you're going to be seeing it along the sides and from more of a profile. So if it has more detailed geometry than just say a flat plane like this, that'll really benefit it. Let's inset, another inset, and maybe one more inset. What I like to do with these is select the edge loop with Alt and then scale. So you can just easily apply it like that. Okay, and then this one too, same thing. Alt, make sure you're deselected, then click Alt so you're only selecting one of the loops. So that's our window. Let's hit Shift D, correct face attributes off. And let's start placing it. Let's keep it at the same height, and then we'll do one down here as well. Let's make some edge loops. I'm just going to be deleting these faces so that they can be inset as windows. Let's join this bay window. And of course, we need to turn that off. Great, and there's 6 windows. Let's do the same over here. Let's actually just delete all of these faces. Just this part. Duplicate that. And let's scale it along the X so it inverts. We're sort of missing a lip on here, so let's go ahead and add that. Let's make this left, and we will put these into this material. It's important that none of the materials on your building are perfectly seamless like this. I think that's a dead giveaway that it is CG and not real life. You don't usually have a situation like this where two different physical materials just blend together. Whenever you can add something like this that can stop that transition. Let's extrude this to here. Can make these a little smaller. A little thinner as well, just so they're not as noticeable. And let's do the same thing with these. I'm just going to borrow this. Well, that's most of the building. So now the only thing that's really missing from this is stuff on the roof and stuff on the ground. And it doesn't really make sense to use the textures at the bottom here to create this geometry. It's just a little too obscured and impractical. The best way is just to make it from scratch with pre-made materials. I've gone ahead and just made it. So if you enable this ground items kit, two things should appear. First is this base stoop here, and second is this little kit of objects. Let's start with the stoop. Let's start by taking this and aligning it so it goes right underneath here. I want it to be just flush with the bottom. That looks pretty good. Before you start the next video, you have two things you need to do. You need to fill this space, and you can use these ground items or anything else. Feel free to make your own models or find other stuff on the internet. And I need you to fill this roof with a few objects. You can find those in the roof items kit. All right, good luck.